I need to hear you say it. Melissa. Did you try to kill me? I sat across from Melissa Hayes, my daughter-in-law, in that cold prison visiting room, my hands trembling as I gripped the phone receiver. A thick glass partition separated us, but I could see her face clearly, too clearly. I needed to hear the truth from her own lips, so I forced the words out. Her answer came without hesitation, without emotion, as cold as the glass between us. Yes, she answered bluntly. That single word shattered whatever hope I'd been clinging to for 3 months. 3 months ago, my daughter-in-law sent me a box of birthday chocolates. Beautiful Belgian chocolates in elegant wrapping with a card that said, I deserved everything. Melissa leaned forward, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my blood freeze. You should have just eaten them, Margaret. Then none of this would have happened. I wouldn't be here. Tears streamed down my face as the full weight of her words hit me. You tried to murder me. She didn't even flinch. Her voice remained flat, matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing the weather. I stared at my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren Emma and Jake, the woman who'd lived in my home for years, and I realized I was looking at a complete stranger. No, worse than that. I was looking at a monster. If you want to hear how this nightmare unfolded, subscribe now, because this story will leave you questioning everyone you trust. Before I continue, let me ask you this. Would you have given away those chocolates? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Margaret Hayes. I was 68 years old and had been a widow for 5 years since my husband Robert passed away. I lived in the house we'd bought together 40 years earlier, worth about $800,000, with $400,000 in savings from Robert's life insurance. I was comfortable, secure. My son David, 42, had moved in with his family 3 years earlier. His wife Melissa was 38, and they had 2 children who were the light of my life. Emma was 8, bright and curious. Jake was 5, sweet and gentle. I helped get them ready for school, made their snacks, tucked them in at night. Those kids were my daily joy, my reason for getting up each morning. That particular day was my birthday. Nothing fancy planned, just a small family dinner that evening. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. A delivery man handed me a gorgeous box wrapped in silver paper. Inside were expensive Belgian chocolates with a card that read, To the best mother-in-law, you deserve everything. Love, Melissa. I had to read it twice. Melissa wasn't usually this thoughtful. There was always a distance between us. But this gesture felt genuine. I was truly touched. Around 2 that afternoon, Linda Parker, Melissa's mother, stopped by with a birthday card. She was 65, a sweet woman I got along with at family gatherings. We sat chatting when her eyes landed on the chocolates. Oh my goodness, are those Maison Laurent chocolates? I haven't had this brand in years. These are my absolute favorites. I didn't even think twice. Linda, please take them. I insist. Too much sugar for me anyway, and you clearly love them more than I would. Linda protested, but I was already wrapping them back up. Consider it my gift to you. Seeing your face light up gives me more joy than eating them myself would have. Just then, Melissa walked in, carrying grocery bags. She saw us with the chocolate box, and her face went completely pale. The colour drained from her cheeks like she'd seen a ghost. Mum, you're taking those home? Her voice was sharp, urgent. Margaret insisted. Linda smiled. I'm going to have them after dinner tonight. Melissa's eyes darted between us, and I watched her swallow hard. Maybe you should wait a few days before eating them. You should savour them slowly. Linda laughed. Oh, honey, you know me. I have no self-control with good chocolate. These probably won't last past tonight. Melissa looked like she wanted to say more, but caught herself. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes and turned away. Linda thanked me and headed home. After she left, I stood there for a moment. Something felt off. Melissa's reaction had been strange. The way her face went pale, the urgency in her voice. Why would she care so much about when her mother ate chocolates? But I pushed the feeling away. Maybe Melissa was just embarrassed that I'd given away her gift. I wish I'd trusted that feeling. I wish I'd listened to that small voice screaming something was wrong. Because everything that came next, all the horror and pain and destruction, it all started with that box of chocolates. That one moment when I decided to be generous. That one decision saved my life. And it nearly ended Linda's. That evening, we sat down for my birthday dinner at 6:30. Nothing elaborate, just roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a simple cake. Emma and Jake sang Happy Birthday, their voices slightly off-key, but absolutely perfect. I blew out the candles and made a wish for more moments like this. More ordinary, peaceful family dinners. I had no idea it would be the last normal moment of my life. We were finishing dessert when David's phone rang at 8:47. His face changed immediately as he stood up from the table. What? When? Is she okay? It was Tom Parker, Linda's husband. Even from across the table, I could hear the panic in his voice. We're coming right now. We'll be there in 15 minutes. David hung up, his face ashen. Linda collapsed. Tom found her seizing on the bathroom floor. The paramedics are taking her to St. Mary's Hospital. My heart dropped. Melissa jumped up, her face going pale. What happened? What's wrong with her? David shook his head, grabbing his keys. She ate dinner, had some chocolate, and within 90 minutes, she was on the floor having seizures. The word chocolate hit me like a physical blow. Those chocolates, the ones I'd given her. My throat closed up completely. We rushed to the hospital, leaving Emma and Jake with our neighbour. When we arrived, Tom was pacing, his face streaked with tears. Through the emergency room window, I could see a team of doctors surrounding a bed. Too many of them. Then I heard it. Suspected poisoning. Get toxicology down here now. A doctor came out asking Tom questions. What did Linda eat today? She had a normal day. After dinner, she had some chocolates, and then, within 90 minutes, she started feeling dizzy. Then the seizures started. The doctor's focus sharpened. Chocolates. Where did they come from? Tom looked at me. Suddenly, every eye in that waiting room was on me. Those were mine. They were my birthday gifts. I gave them to her. I stood there, frozen, as realization crashed down on me. Those chocolates were meant for me. And now Linda was fighting for her life because I'd been generous. If you think this story is already devastating, you have no idea what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button because this gets so much worse. Within an hour, doctors confirmed Linda was in critical condition. They'd induced a coma to stop the seizures. The preliminary tests suggested severe poisoning. Hospital security called the police. This was a potential homicide attempt. 2 detectives arrived and questioned each of us. When they got to me, I explained everything. The chocolate delivery, the card from Melissa, how I'd given them to Linda. One detective leaned forward. The gift came from your daughter-in-law? I nodded. They took Melissa aside for questioning. Through the glass door, I watched her panic. She was making frantic gestures, shaking her head. She looked terrified. David stood next to me in complete denial. This has to be food contamination. There's no way someone deliberately poisoned those chocolates. But I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew. Those chocolates were meant for me. Someone had wanted me dead. And that someone was Melissa. Over the next 48 hours, Linda remained critical on life support. The toxicology results came back. Arsenic. Severe arsenic poisoning. Enough to kill within hours. 1 week later, the detectives asked David and me to come to the police station. What they told us destroyed every assumption I'd ever made about Melissa. The delivery service had records. Melissa had ordered those chocolates herself. She'd written that card. It was all her. Melissa's laptop search history from 3 months earlier showed searches for arsenic poisoning symptoms, untraceable poisons, lethal doses, and how to avoid detection in an autopsy. She'd planned this for months. Then the financial motive emerged. Melissa had $180,000 in hidden credit card debt David knew nothing about. She'd been searching for expensive houses with notes attached. After inheritance. David ran to the trash can and vomited. I sat there, numb. They'd found text messages on a burner phone, messages that said, "The old woman won't last forever. Then we get everything." The old woman. That was me. "She's been planning this for months," I whispered. "Maybe longer." 2 weeks after Linda ate those chocolates, police arrested Melissa. They charged her with attempted first-degree murder. Bail was set at $500,000. She couldn't post it. I was drowning in emotions. Guilt, because Linda was dying in my place. Betrayal, because Melissa had tried to murder me. And fear, because I realized how close I'd come. Let me ask you something. If you discovered your daughter-in-law tried to kill you, could you ever forgive her? Tell me in the comments. Melissa had tried to kill me for money, for my house, for my savings. Money Robert and I had worked our entire lives to build. And she'd been willing to poison me just to get her hands on it faster. If I'd just eaten those chocolates like I was supposed to, her plan might have worked. It might have looked like natural causes. She'd researched the dosage carefully, just enough to kill, but not so much that it would immediately scream murder. I'd saved my own life by being generous. And in doing so, I'd condemned an innocent woman to the very death that was meant for me. Linda Parker spent 3 weeks in the ICU, and every single day was touch and go. The doctors told us multiple times to prepare for the worst. Her organs were shutting down. Her kidneys were failing. Even if she survived, she would never be the same. I kept vigil at that hospital with Tom. We sat in those uncomfortable waiting room chairs for hours, saying very little. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words. Finally, on the 5th day, Tom turned to me. "You didn't poison her, Margaret, I know that. Logically, I know that." He paused. But he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I didn't poison Linda, but I gave her the poison. I handed it to her with a smile. If I hadn't been generous, his wife wouldn't be dying in that hospital bed. The guilt consumed me. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Linda's face when she'd said those chocolates were her favorite. At home, Emma and Jake kept asking about their mommy. David struggled to explain. "Mommy made a very bad mistake and has to go away for a while." Emma's face crumpled. "What kind of mistake? When is she coming home?" David couldn't answer. "How do you tell your children that their mother tried to kill their grandmother?" I watched my son age for years in weeks. The lines around his eyes deepened. His hair seemed to grey overnight. His entire understanding of his life had been shattered. The woman he'd loved had been planning to murder his mother. And he'd never suspected a thing. On the 21st day, Linda finally stabilized enough to be moved out of the ICU. The doctors explained the damage. Her kidney function was down to 35%. She would need dialysis twice a week for the rest of her life. The arsenic had caused neurological damage. Her hands trembled constantly. She had chronic pain that would never fully go away. She had survived, but she would never fully recover. When Linda was finally awake enough to understand what had happened, Tom asked me to wait outside. I stood in that hospital hallway and listened. I heard Tom's voice, low and gentle, explaining that she'd been poisoned, that the chocolates had contained arsenic, that Melissa, their daughter, had sent them, had tried to kill Margaret, had almost killed Linda instead. And then I heard Linda scream. It was a sound I will never forget. Pure, devastating anguish. The kind of sound a mother makes when her entire world implodes. Her daughter had tried to commit murder, and she nearly died because of it. Linda survived. But would she ever forgive me for the gift that almost killed her? If you're feeling the weight of this story, imagine living it. Subscribe to hear how this family tried to pick up the pieces of something that could never be put back together. 3 months after Melissa's arrest, I finally felt ready to face her. I needed to hear the truth directly from her lips. David refused to visit her. He wouldn't even speak her name anymore. But I had to know. Was it real? Had she actually tried to kill me? I drove to the prison on a cold Tuesday morning. I went through multiple checkpoints, was searched, and finally was led into the visiting room. Melissa sat on the other side of a glass partition, wearing an orange jumpsuit. She looked thinner, her face harder, but her eyes were what struck me most. They were cold, angry. There was no remorse, no guilt, just bitterness. We picked up the phone receivers. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then I forced myself to ask the question. I need to hear you say it. Did you try to kill me? Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. Why? Melissa leaned back, her voice matter of fact. You were a burden. That house, that money, it should be David's. It should be ours. You just sit around being old, wasting resources that could give us a better life. I felt like I'd been slapped. My own money, from Robert, money he and I worked our entire lives for. Money that could give Emma and Jake a better life, private schools, a real house instead of living with their grandmother. The entitlement in her voice was staggering. She genuinely believed she had a right to my money. You tried to murder me for money? Melissa leaned forward, her voice bitter. You should have just eaten the damn chocolates, Margaret. If you had, my mother wouldn't be permanently disabled. I wouldn't be sitting in this prison. This is your fault for being generous. Who gives away their own birthday gift? I stared at her in complete shock. You're blaming me? I planned everything perfectly. The dosage was exact. It would have looked like natural causes, but you ruined it. You gave away the one thing you were supposed to keep. A mother is dying because of you. Your own mother. Melissa's face twisted with anger. My mother. And I have to live with that. But you were supposed to die, not her. You were too old to need that money anyway. I realized then that nothing I said would matter. There would be no explanation, no remorse. Melissa was simply capable of evil. Some people are. I hung up the phone without another word and left. I'd hoped for closure. Instead, I'd gotten confirmation that the monster was real, and she felt no guilt whatsoever. 6 months after Melissa's arrest, the trial began. I had to testify. The defense argued she'd had a temporary mental break, that financial stress had caused her to act irrationally. But the prosecutor dismantled that argument. They presented Melissa's laptop search history, showing months of research into poisons. They showed her purchase of arsenic through the dark web. They revealed a pattern of behavior. Melissa had been asking me about my will for over a year. This wasn't a momentary break. This was a long-term plan. Against her attorney's advice, Melissa took the stand. "I wanted a better life for my family," she said flatly. The prosecutor approached her. "Ms. Hayes, do you regret your actions?" Melissa paused. "I regret that it didn't work as planned." The courtroom went completely silent. She regretted getting caught. She regretted that her mother had eaten the chocolates instead of me. But she didn't regret trying to murder me. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty of attempted first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, eligible for parole in 20. I gave a victim impact statement. "I live with 2 faults. The first is that I was almost killed by someone I trusted. But the second guilt is worse. My kindness nearly killed an innocent woman. Melissa didn't just try to take my life. She stole my sense of safety. She stole my ability to trust. But worse, she stole my ability to give freely without fear. That's what Melissa Hayes has taken from me, and I will carry that burden until the day I die. Let me ask you this. If someone you loved tried to kill you, could you ever trust anyone again? Leave your thoughts in the comments." Melissa showed no reaction. She sat there, stone-faced, as if I were talking about someone else. And as they led her away in handcuffs, I realized that was the most terrifying part. She genuinely believed she'd done nothing wrong. In her mind, I was the problem. And if she'd succeeded, she would have gone on with her life without a second thought. Evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like your daughter-in-law. Sometimes it smiles at you over breakfast. Sometimes it writes you birthday cards and tucks your grandchildren into bed at night. And you never see it coming until it's too late. Linda Parker was finally discharged from the hospital after 2 months. 2 full months of fighting for her life, of treatments and procedures and machines keeping her organs functioning. But she didn't come home the same person who'd left. Her kidney function was permanently damaged, sitting at just 35%. She needed dialysis twice a week, every week, for the rest of her life. She had chronic pain that no medication could fully touch. Her hands shook constantly from nerve damage, making simple tasks like holding a coffee cup or buttoning a shirt nearly impossible. Linda had been a teacher for 30 years. She loved her job, loved her students. But she couldn't work anymore. She was on disability now, her entire life completely transformed by 2 pieces of chocolate she'd eaten on what should have been an ordinary evening. The medical bills were crushing. Over $400,000. Insurance covered most of it, but the co-pays and ongoing treatment costs were astronomical. Tom was drowning, trying to keep up with the expenses. I started sending checks through my lawyer. I didn't tell Linda or Tom directly at first. I just quietly paid what I could, covering the dialysis co-pays, the medication costs, the physical therapy bills. Tom found out eventually and called me. His voice was thick with emotion. "Margaret, you don't have to do this." But I did. I absolutely did. It was the very least I could do, though it would never be enough. Tom accepted the help reluctantly because they needed it. Because without it, they would lose everything they'd worked for. But I knew that every check I sent was also a reminder of what had happened. A reminder that his wife was suffering because of me. 4 months after the poisoning, Linda finally agreed to meet me face to face. We chose a coffee shop, neutral ground, where neither of us would feel trapped. I arrived early and sat at a corner table, my hands shaking almost as badly as I knew Linda's would be. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She'd lost at least 30 pounds. Her face was gaunt, her movements careful and pained. She sat down slowly, and I noticed how her hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. She couldn't drink from it, though. Her grip wasn't strong enough. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then Linda spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I know you didn't poison me, Margaret. Logically, I know that." I waited. I knew what was coming. But Linda's eyes filled with tears. "But every time I go to dialysis, every time my hands shake too much to hold a cup, every time the pain wakes me up at 3 in the morning, I think about your birthday. I think about those chocolates, about how happy I was to receive them. And I can't separate those memories from what they did to me." I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I'm so sorry." "I know you are." Her voice cracked. "And I'm trying to forgive you. I really am. I'm trying to separate you from this, to remember that you're a victim too. But it's hard, Margaret. It's so hard." I nodded, unable to speak. What could I say? Sorry it wasn't enough? Sorry would never be enough. Our relationship now consisted of occasional text messages. Linda would send brief updates about her health, about how physical therapy was going. I would respond carefully, respectfully, never pushing for more than she was willing to give. The warmth we'd once shared, the easy friendship between in-laws, was gone. Maybe forever. Some relationships don't survive tragedy, even when no one means harm, even when both people are victims of the same evil. The poison that was meant for me had destroyed more than just Linda's health. It had destroyed our connection too. David filed for divorce immediately after Melissa's sentencing. The process took 8 months of paperwork and lawyers and cold legal language to end a marriage that had already died the moment those chocolates were tested. Melissa's parental rights were terminated due to her conviction. Emma and Jake would grow up without their mother, and that was somehow both tragic and necessary. Both children were in therapy, trying to process the impossible truth that their mummy had tried to hurt their grandma. Emma developed trauma responses that broke my heart. She wouldn't eat any food that came in packaging she hadn't personally opened. She had severe anxiety around gifts, especially on birthdays. The simple joy of receiving a present had been stolen from her. Jake had nightmares almost every night. He would wake up screaming, and when David or I would comfort him, he would sob the same words over and over. Bad people look like good people. How do we know? How do we know who's bad? How do you answer that? How do you give a 5-year-old a sense of safety in a world where his own mother turned out to be a monster? I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Every room held memories that had been poisoned, recontextualized by the truth. The kitchen where Melissa had smiled at me while planning my death. The living room where she'd played with her children while waiting for me to die. I moved to a small 2-bedroom condo across town. David and the kids moved to a townhouse nearby. At first, my visits with Emma and Jake were supervised. Not because anyone thought I would hurt them, but because the whole family was so fractured, so traumatized, that we needed professional guidance on how to rebuild. I saw them 3 times a week. We played games, read books, did normal grandparent things. But there was a shadow over everything now. David struggled with paranoia that consumed him. He told me one night, his voice shaking, that he'd been going through old memories, replaying every meal Melissa had ever cooked, every time she'd handed him medicine for a headache, every drink she'd poured for him. "Did she ever try with me?" he asked, his eyes haunted. "With the kids? Was I next? Were they? How long was she planning to kill you? And if you died, who would have been next?" I had no answers for him. None of us did. The extended family fractured too. Some of Melissa's relatives claimed I had somehow entrapped her, that I'd set her up. They said I was greedy, holding on to money that should go to the younger generation. The blame they directed at me was almost as painful as Melissa's betrayal. Almost. If this story has gripped you, if you need to see how it ends, subscribe now, because the final chapter will stay with you long after this video ends. Christmas came, the first without Melissa. We tried to make it normal for Emma and Jake, but the absence was impossible to ignore. As we sat around the tree in David's townhouse, Emma looked up at her father with those big, solemn eyes. "Is Mommy sad in jail? Does she miss us?" David paused, and I watched him make the decision to tell the truth. His children deserved truth, even when it hurt. "I don't think Mommy feels sad the way we do, sweetheart. I think Mommy's brain works differently than ours. And that's not your fault. It's nobody's fault, except hers." Emma nodded slowly, processing this, and my heart shattered for her. 8 years old, and already learning that some people are incapable of love in the way the rest of us understand it. I started going to therapy weekly. I was diagnosed with PTSD, survivor's guilt, and complex grief. My therapist explained that I was carrying 2 distinct types of guilt that were eating me alive. The first was survivor guilt. Why did I deserve to live when Linda was suffering? What made my life more valuable than hers? Why had I been spared? The second was transfer guilt. Linda's suffering existed because of my generosity. My kind gesture had nearly killed her. Every time she went to dialysis, every moment of pain she experienced stemmed directly from my choice to give her those chocolates. My therapist tried to reframe it. "Your kindness saved your life, Margaret. That's not wrong. That's not something to feel guilty about." But I couldn't accept that. "It destroyed hers," I whispered. "My life came at the cost of hers." There were no easy answers, no simple solutions. I had to learn to live with ambiguity, with the reality that 2 truths could exist simultaneously. I was a victim, and my actions had harmed someone else. Both were true. Both would always be true. I joined a support group for violent crime victims and found some measure of community there. People who understood trauma, who understood that surviving doesn't mean you're okay. It just means you're still here. The nightmares came almost every night, variations on the same theme. Sometimes I saw myself eating the chocolates, felt the poison burning through my system. Sometimes Linda died, and I attended her funeral, knowing I was the reason she was in that casket. Sometimes Emma or Jake found the chocolates and ate them before I could stop them. I would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Linda sent brief text messages every few weeks, updates on her health, small details about her life. I treasured each one like a lifeline. Each text was proof that she was alive, that she was trying to forgive me, that maybe someday we might find our way back to something resembling peace. There were small moments of healing. Jake brought me a drawing he'd made at school, his face proud and hopeful. Emma fell asleep on my couch during a movie, trusting me enough to be vulnerable. These moments reminded me why I was fighting to stay present, to stay alive, to carry this guilt without letting it destroy me completely. I learned something important in those months. Some guilt becomes part of you. You don't overcome it, or conquer it, or let it go. You learn to carry it. You integrate it into who you are. It changes you, but it doesn't have to define you. My 69th birthday approached, and David called me. "Should we celebrate?" His voice was uncertain. "Or should we skip it? I don't want to make things harder." I thought about it for a long moment. "Life continues," I finally said. "We celebrate quietly. We choose to keep living." So we did. Just the 4 of us, a small dinner at David's townhouse, a homemade cake that Emma and Jake had helped decorate. It was simple and quiet, and nothing like the birthdays before. But it was real. It was us, still here, still trying. Emma watched me blow out the candles, her expression serious. "Did you make a wish, Grandma?" "I wished for healing," I told her, meaning it with everything in me. For all of us. I'd gotten text messages that morning with updates. Linda was doing physical therapy and had started part-time tutoring from home. She texted me 2 words: "Happy birthday." Those 2 words meant everything. David had started dating someone new, very cautiously. He was introducing her slowly to Emma and Jake, afraid to trust, afraid to let anyone into their lives. But he was trying. That was what mattered. Melissa still sent letters from prison. David burned them without reading them. Her relatives told us she was writing about how she'd been wronged, how this was all my fault, how I had stolen her life from her. Even now, she felt no remorse, only anger. Emma's anxiety was improving slowly. Jake's nightmares had decreased to about once a month. We were all healing, inch by painful inch. That night, after David and the kids dropped me home, I stood in my small condo kitchen. A new box of chocolates sat on the counter. David had bought them for me, a gesture of normalcy, of trying to reclaim something that had been taken from us. I stared at that box for a long time. My hands reached out, picked it up. The weight of it felt wrong in my hands, heavy with memory and terror and guilt. I opened the cupboard and placed the box inside, unopened. Maybe I will eat them later. Maybe I never would. I didn't know yet. Here's my final question for you. Can you ever really forgive yourself for something that wasn't your fault but caused so much pain? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I'm still searching for that answer myself. People asked me constantly if I'd forgiven Melissa Hayes. The answer was simple. No. I hadn't forgiven her, and I didn't think I ever would. What she did was unforgivable. She tried to murder me for money. She felt no remorse when her own mother nearly died instead. She blamed me for her actions. There was nothing to forgive because she didn't believe she needed forgiveness. But people also asked if I'd forgiven myself. That answer was more complicated. I was trying. Every single day, I was trying. Evil doesn't announce itself with horns and a pitchfork. It doesn't wear a sign or give you warning. Sometimes it smiles at you over breakfast. Sometimes it plays with your grandchildren, reading them bedtime stories and tucking them in with a kiss. Sometimes it writes, "Love always," on a birthday card, while carefully researching the exact dosage of poison needed to kill you without raising suspicion. I thought about those chocolates constantly, about the moment I handed them to Linda Parker with a smile and good intentions. And I wrestled with an impossible question that had no right answer. If I could go back in time, knowing everything I know now, would I still give them away? Would I choose my life over hers? I wanted to say I'd find another way, that I'd warn everyone, call the police, stop it all before anyone got hurt. But that wasn't how it worked. In that moment, with the knowledge I had then, I made a kind choice that saved my life and nearly ended Linda's. I had to live with both of those truths. Some days the guilt was absolutely crushing. I would wake up and the weight of it would press down on my chest so heavily I couldn't breathe. Those days, getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. But other days, I would watch Emma laugh at something silly, or feel Jake's small hand slip into mine with complete trust, and I would be grateful to be alive to witness it. Grateful that I got to be here for these children who needed me. Grateful that Melissa's plan had failed, even though the cost of that failure had been devastating. That gratitude and that guilt existed together now. They always would. They were two sides of the same coin, impossible to separate. And maybe that was what surviving really meant, carrying the weight of what almost was, what should never have been, and still choosing to be here for the people who needed you. The chocolates sat in my cupboard, unopened. I couldn't throw them away. Something in me needed them there, needed the reminder. But I couldn't eat them either. They represented too much. They were a symbol of the day my life changed forever. The day I learned that kindness saved my life. And that kindness has a cost I will never finish paying. Linda was alive, but damaged forever. My relationship with her was fractured, maybe permanently. Emma and Jake were traumatized in ways that would affect them for the rest of their lives. David had lost his ability to trust. Our family had been destroyed and rebuilt into something new and strange and scarred. All because I gave away a birthday gift. All because Melissa wanted money more than she valued human life. All because evil exists. And sometimes it sits across from you at the dinner table, and you never know until it's almost too late. I lived with those truths now. I carried them with me every day. And I would keep carrying them, keep choosing to be here, keep trying to forgive myself for a kindness that became a curse. Because that's what survivors do. We carry the weight. We keep going. We choose life. Even when life is complicated and painful and full of guilt, we choose to be here for the people who need us. And we never, ever forget what almost was. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.